All right, I'll go ahead and call the January 25th, 2023 Nottingham Planning Board meeting to order. We'll go around the room, starting on my right, and have everybody introduce themselves, please.
Robert Davies, alternate.
Gary Anderson.
John Moran. Ian McKinnon.
Edward Veal.
Susan Mooney.
And Mr. Davies will be seated in voting for Ms. Sandler tonight. Before we get started, we have a couple of items on the agenda. We're gonna take the items in order. Given the recent storms and everything else, I think everybody here, I'm just gonna extend on behalf of everybody, a lot of gratitude to our fire, police, emergency services, our road crews have been tremendous, and all the line workers out there that have been diligently working to restore power for us and allow us to have this meeting here tonight. So the first item on the agenda was the second public hearing for zoning amendments for roadway setbacks. We had held the first public hearing on January 11th for this. We made some edits to it and decided that we wanted to hold the second public hearing based on some of those edits. Edits in the renewed or revised verbiage to town council. A couple of thoughts that came back for us to consider, and one was, did we intend for this vegetative buffer setback to be the length of the new road along any abutting property boundary? And my understanding from our conversations at the board was yes. Basically, it wasn't 10 feet in or 100 feet in to have it be vegetated and then, you know, could be cut. It was the length. And another thing for us to consider is if we wanted to include any verbiage about connections to existing or future roads.
That was in some of the original?
So if we were to add that, anything about that in tonight, that'd be a substantive change. It'd basically make this moot for this year because we don't have time to hold another public hearing before the deadline.
What is that question, Ed?
Whether or not we should include any kind of verbiage about, like an exception, so except as required for like a new, except as is required for a connection to an existing or future road. So that would, so right now, the way we have the language for a roadway setback, that 25-foot strip, vegetative buffer, you know, we don't have anything in there that says, you know, that they could connect to an existing road. I don't think, I'm trying to think of anything that we've had recently or in the last few years that would have been impacted by that, and I can't.
One times we impacted it for some reason there's an expansion of a subdivision onto an adjacent property, or if an abutting lot chooses that they'd like to take their driveway off of a new road for some reason. I've run into that where it's a better layout to have their driveway taken off this new subdivision road, but I'm just kind of reading it to see if, and I guess because we say no disturb, it kind of precludes that crossing.
The way that we have it proposed doesn't prohibit that, it just doesn't discuss it.
Right.
So it would still be possible in the future to make that
Clarify.
change.
Clarify.
Right.
And then if the possibility comes up between now and then, certainly we'll be open to, be favorable in all parties.
It's also, if you read it literally, it says the right of way of all new roads or streets shall maintain that buffer. In theory, if that's, somebody puts a driveway in the future, that's not a new roadway, if you wanna take it literally, so then it's a unique, a case-by-case basis, I guess, too. So I don't think it would preclude a driveway or road connection.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with the verbiage as we have it, the amended version that we had written, on it. I think it captures the intent, of what we were looking to do. It's not overly restrictive, but it does add that layer of, you know, buffer between existing lots, existing homes, existing lots, and new roads and developments. This is the second public hearing, so I'll open the the public comment portion. Is there anybody here that would like to speak towards this item? Just, if you can, just identify yourself, please.
Barry Geyer, 88 Garland. I'm in the business, so this would appear to be creating a spite strip. And if I'm wrong, then I'll let it go at that. But if you're putting in a new road and you make them maintain 25 foot from the right-of-way to the property of the abutting property, then the abutting property could not utilize that new road to put in driveways, because they would have a strip that they don't own, which is kind of the definition of a spite strip, in my understanding.
Does everybody know what a spike strip is?
No,
So that's basically the definition of a spite strip, is when if you're subdividing your property and you don't want the abutter to be able to access that new road, you leave a strip that you own that isn't right away. So that say he has another 100 acres next to yours, and you come in with the road, he could break off 2-acre lots without putting in a new road, because he could use your road for the frontage. But if you leave a strip of property that is not right away and is not owned by the abutter, that becomes a spite strip because he cannot access the new roadway. Just food for thought.
Yeah, I think, so the intent of this was to try to have that, be neighborly and have, promote, cohesiveness in the town, but harmony as much as possible.
Sure, absolutely.
Avoiding, if there's these existing lots, especially if they have homes on them, and all of a sudden a roadway gets dropped on their property line, serving any number of houses, it's, well, they're stuck.
And I'd say the intent, correct me if I'm wrong, but just for me sitting here, there's a lot of parcels in Nottingham where we have the 200 feet to frontage that goes out to 40 acres or 50 acres. So what they believe the intent was, that we're protecting that front so that it stays the rural look, and that it's just the road, and that it's not just a cleared area.
Yeah, I understand the intent.
Okay, I'm just
Yeah, I think,
reiterating for.
I think the problem is that if you do, even if the neighbor to the development only has 6 acres, if he had sufficient frontage, he could break off 3 lots without having to build any road, is kind of what has occurred in the past. But if you put a strip in that separates the neighbor from the right-of-way, that precludes him from being able to do that.
Well, that would only exist, I guess, if either the road was accepted as a public road through a town meeting, or if the owner of such road came to some kind of agreement with the abutter.
No, that's the problem. See, if you create a road that is accepted by the town or a public road, then everybody has access to it that abuts it.
Yeah, if accepted as a.
If
public road.
accepted.
But if not, like.
But
there's
if,
a lot of-
but if you leave a strip in there that prevents him from accessing that road, that's where the issue becomes. Then the neighbor doesn't have the right to access without purchasing the property.
Right.
And I'll say I thought about this too, and I think, because we've seen some design reviews and stuff come in, and we've seen it where somebody's placed a road either right on the property line, which is the concern that kind of drove this. But then they've also done it where the right of way might have been 50 feet up, because of the spacing was 50-foot separation, then the 50-foot right of way, and then some lots over here. So it's kind of, sometimes the design already creates that strip, and I think the board's intent was to define a minimum per se.
Yeah. And make sure that someone doesn't come in and say, well, we want it right here on the property line, and we have nothing in our verbiage to,
What was the verbiage basis for the point of preventing people from putting a road on a property line?
correct.
That is what the reason for doing this.
Yeah. And then give some kind of,
And if that's the case, if it does go by like that, then what you're asking there wouldn't be possible for that abutting neighbor, because the fact that the road has to be 50 feet away, and that land is owned by.
Somebody else.
By the development or by the association or whatever like
Right.
this, so that would have no access.
And oftentimes,
Correct.
that
That's
property
an
might
issue.
be part of the open space for, say,
That,
conservation
most,
or
most likely that front 50 or whatever that space is gonna be into the open space.
It's gonna be a finger, yeah.
It's
exactly,
gonna be
yeah.
part of it, I mean, it's
Yeah.
gonna be used as the calculation.
I don't think it's gonna count.
What was the status? You said this has already been, the updated language was reviewed by council?
Yeah, basically those are kind of the questions that arose, and my understanding of what basically came out of it was,
So the verbiage that they had is probably in an effort, well, even then, it doesn't really, the language they suggested about future connection doesn't solve the ownership issue of the underlying land.
Well, the only way
It's
to
not
connect,
compliant.
the only way to connect it would be if a strip of land was set aside by the developer.
You have to place
that
an easement
would-
over it,
Would,
yeah.
that would abut, like if he said this lot here, lot whatever it is, and it abuts the neighboring road, that would allow future development of a road to go through.
Right, you'd have to plan for that. yeah.
Right, that'd be part of the maybe potential future. I mean, would you say it was like the development we did off, on the other side of town, where they started on one side, they came off Lincoln,
Ridge.
whatever, Maple Ridge, right? We had that, and obviously we knew eventually in the 3 phases that it was gonna be a connected road, but first it went with one road, then it went with another road, then there was a connected in the middle. But it was a 3-phase development, I mean, that was, and we didn't really set a, we did set kind of a timeline, but that was, his idea was obviously to put the development in as quick as possible to make his money. But we did phase him in a 3-phase with that kind of idea, I take it, right?
yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, the original two were someone else, Friar Tuck and the other one, Lollipop. And so his proposal was he owned on the land in between, and there was space for a connection. So yeah, they put the road in between.
So I guess the question is,
I don't see a problem, because if it's done right, the future planning of wherever the development can make whatever he wants to make it happen, but
Yeah.
that's,
if the board's fine with pushing it forward, I do think maybe if, I don't know what our deadline is, could we pose one, well, I mean, in terms of, posting of final warrant articles or something.
That's it. That's
yeah, that's,
I guess the question is,
the last public hearing.
could we pose one more question to the attorney, just, and you can actually use that term spike strip, because it's a widely accepted term that the state of New Hampshire has made sure is, some states it is allowed and still used, a lot of places out west, they actually statesly use it to protect their access.
Yeah.
Could we just pose one more question to, I mean, I think I'm fine with moving it forward, but I think it would be worthwhile just to pose that question about if they feel it would constitute.
Yeah,
You kinda have to throw a hypothetical situation, like it would be a finger of land that connects probably to a larger piece of open space in reality. But it could be its own standalone piece of land, depending on layout, so.
Right, so when it comes to spike strips, I can see it like if the developer is proposing to do it specifically to keep people from connecting to the road that they build, to protect the houses that they build, in there from having limited number of, you
Right.
know, houses that are coming
Future
into their.
congestion or something.
it also protects the
But
developer's
we're-
interest.
But we can also say, you know, it could be the town's interest to say, well, that's what we prefer as a town. So that we can phase out our growth in a different way.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, I think it's worth posing that one last question.
So-
Just so we have an answer on it.
Yeah, and I can, and I definitely will. So tonight, I think we have to have final action
Yeah.
on if we're moving forward or not with this as written. I can still pose the question. I
Yeah,
won't have an
that's all.
answer until our next
This-
That's fine.
meeting.
Is this article based on any other town's article?
Not, no.
Not the specific language.
Not the specific language that's involved, no.
So this 50-foot idea is our idea?
Yeah, and we dropped it to 25, yeah.
25, 50 in the commercial.
I'm sorry, yes, 25 in the residential,
Oh.
50 in commercial, and because of how much residential we already have in our commercial zone.
There is other towns, like the town of Brentwood, I don't have the language on me, but they do have a roadway setback. It's a fairly complicated calculation. They have a provision there to account for if somebody only has, say, 50 or 60 foot right of way to go back, if there's like an exception. Like you can shift the road to one side depending on what's on each side and stuff like that. Theirs is a pretty involved regulation, if I recall.
Was there any other public comment or questions on the, so we're discussing the warrant article proposal for zoning amendment. On this one is roadway setbacks, from existing lots.
I just got here, so I didn't know what was said.
Okay, so we're, on the first item in our agenda is, we have a proposed zoning amendment. This is a second public hearing for them. We're proposing the addition of, in our zoning ordinance, of creating a roadway setback. We're proposing to create basically a buffer of 25 feet from any existing property line, a vegetative buffer within the residential agricultural district, and then a 50-foot buffer within the commercial industrial district. So basically saying that any new road can't be dropped right on an existing property line if it's not part of the subdivision.
What are the common setbacks?
So, common setbacks, in town, so we oftentimes are in 25, 50-foot, 100-foot integrals into increments, thank you. So, we went with 25 in the residential zone and 50 in the commercial, partially due to what kind of traffic generally would be involved. Obviously, commercial, oftentimes larger commercial vehicles, so we're trying to give a slightly greater buffer there for, from existing structures, existing houses, existing properties.
You get it? Look, if you're gonna put a new development in, the road coming off the road, the existing road has to have 25-foot setback from somebody's property, so we're not encroaching on their privacy and their space.
Yeah. Trying to make a harmonious subdivision.
The only thing I did notice is, Alana, can you scroll up to the top, the ballot language? I think we need to update.
Yeah, it's missing.
Yeah, so we need to specify it's 25 feet in the residential agricultural and 50 feet in the commercial. Since there's,
Yeah, I thought,
Catch it again.
just wanna make sure we catch that on the ballot language.
yeah.
And if we need to include that in a motion, we can.
Was there any other public comment?
Yeah, I'll move things forward.
Has all the other stuff been, that you had questions on been met?
For this article,
Yeah, well,
or,
in general?
I'm not quite certain of the question,
Well, I know there was the Lamprey River thing, was that all?
Oh, this is not.
oh, no,
case
sorry, so
specific.
this is not case specific, sorry, so we're not on any cases right now, right now, we're holding public hearings for zoning amendments, so we're holding,
These are gonna be warrant articles when you
They'll go
go
on
to
the
vote
town.
on Tuesday.
right, these will be on the town ballot, yeah, apologize.
This is a town code to which projects must comply.
Gotcha.
per se.
So they're gonna enter into our zoning ordinances.
Yeah.
Yeah, future town projects, correct. All
In
right,
case you're looking for is,
Come on.
yeah, if we're lucky, we'll get there.
so I'll close the public hearing at 7:21 PM. So I'll go to the council and just inquire about the spice strips, if we find
I
out.
think it's worth posing the question,
You
just
know.
so we're informed.
Is there any other discussion from the board? If not, I think a motion, on whether or not this moves forward, is in order.
Mr. Chair, I move that we, forward the roadway setback, proposed amendments to the, warrant.
We have a motion by Ms. Mooney, is there a second? Second by Mr. Anderson. Is there any further discussion?
Can we just make sure the motion includes modifying the ballot language? We just need to make sure we specify 25 foot in residential, 50 foot in commercial. Ballot just says 50 blanket right now.
Would you like to amend your
Yeah,
motion?
so we just gotta,
With modifications to the, descriptive of 25 feet and 50 feet in the residential and respectively the commercial zone.
Thank you. Ms. Mooney amended her motion.
And amended over here as well in the second.
Seconded, amendment by Mr. Anderson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? No, motion carries, 510. All right, second public hearing that we have for tonight is the second public hearing for updates to the Aquifer Protection District. At the last meeting, we made a few changes, basically added the fire chief is one of the responsible parties. Cleaned up. Trying to find my edits on there.
We modified lot coverage. Alana's got the edit up on the screen.
Yeah, modify the, a few other things on there. Some of it's clean up, some of it's inclusion, so again, just as a recap for this was a part where Nottingham was included in a grant. And we already have an aquifer protection district. This is kind of a best practices update to include and strengthen that a bit, or clarify, some items.
Wasn't that also the case for this here, is that bring our standards up to state standards, the reason why we're doing this per se?
Correct.
So yeah, that was a big one.
So this is not something that we're making up, we're actually just
We already have it.
updating our present zoning so that it meets what the state has already written for their aquifer protection.
Yeah, to be more in line with that, and then to kind of give
I'm just trying to simplify it.
some, some additional clarification verbiage.
I was good with it. It was mostly housekeeping.
I went through and looked to make sure that all the edits were captured in our new document here. Everything seems to be in order.
I'll open the public hearing again for this. If there's anybody that would like to speak towards this, has any questions about this, please come up. Second call. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. So open at 7:24, close at 7:25. Any further discussion from the board?
Should we put the fact that we're trying to comply with the state regulations in our description that's gonna go before the voters?
Alana, do you have the description up there as to what the ballot language was gonna say?
The very top, yeah. You could add another semicolon, just state something like that.
Well, right now, we're not explaining why we're putting this through.
Throw it at the end.
Charlene was putting together some prose that she had me edit that would be on the town website, explaining what these amendments are to do. And most of the items, if not all, have to do with bringing the language up to state regulations, aligning them with the state.
That was something we discussed.
But that's
at
not
the-
something we have in front of us tonight.
Yeah, at the last meeting, and I apologize, I meant to print that, and I did not.
Yeah, I don't think we can put that on the ballot.
No, we were
No,
we were
no.
planning on putting it on the website.
It's gonna be on the former thing, and then it'll be reiterated at deliberation when we go over the warrant articles.
I do agree with Buzz in having just some description of why this is happening, so really,
And when people read the
To-
website,
to
then
meet state requirements, it's just something short that
Yeah,
people will understand.
that we've done our homework.
Right, right.
Mr. Haley was a big part of this, SRPC was a big part of this, that they were the grant recipients, probably not the right term. So they did the majority of the work on this. We try to add some clarifying language, or leave it to what we put on the website.
I could go either way. If we're gonna do a separate document, no, get into the details then.
Would anybody like to make a motion on this?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the warrant article, Aquifer Protection District, as proposed, to allow wording in the ballot language, which would say in order to meet state regulations.
A second?
Motion by Mr. Anderson, a second by Ms. Mooney. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any those opposed? That motion carries 6-0. All right. So those will be, so we'll have 4 warrant articles from the planning board for zoning amendments this year. The 2 previous, that we mentioned, at the last meeting. And then the 2, the roadway setbacks that we mentioned tonight, as well as, updates to our aquifer protection district, items. So that brings us to our public hearing for case, continued case number 22-011-SUB, application from Jones and Beach Engineering on behalf of Jim Rosborough, requesting an 11-lot subdivision. The property is located on Moores Road in Nottingham, New Hampshire, identified as tax map 72, lot 13-1. The applicant has filed a conditional use permit. We've already acted on the conditional use permits. I believe there was 3, and I think we addressed all 3 previously.
And I'd comment on that.
Yeah, and I'll bring that up, so.
Mr. Chair, I'll recuse myself for this one as I have on the previous, public hearings.
So let the record show, Mr. McKinnon has recused and is, removing himself from the table. So before we, before I have Mr. Guyer give us an update as to where things have gone between the last meeting and here, Mr. Moran had submitted a question about continuity or on board decisions, specifically regarding one of our votes on the conditional use permit in conformity with other prior approved plans. The question specifically was, there was another open space subdivision in town, Rocky Hill, which had larger lots. So why was it approved there and not approved here to allow the larger lots? So I'm gonna have very narrow, discussion on this, because we've already, it's a conditional use permit, we've already held a vote on it, and taken action, final action on it. Well, what I can say is the Rocky Hill, from my research, that was 12 years ago, that was approved. I can't remember, I think it was on the docket for quite a while before that. In the approved plan, they give the setbacks within the open space subdivision. They didn't mention the maximum lot or any of those. They mentioned some minimums, max height only. So I'm not certain. We've had many amendments to our zoning ordinance since that time, including in 2010 to the open space subdivisions, or 2011. So it's unclear to me what has changed in our zoning. It could be interpretation, it could be that something actually changed in the ordinance itself. I think consistency is good from this board, but then again, every new board can apply their own interpretations to even the existing ordinance that's there. So sometimes things get missed. We don't like that if that happens, but without digging through the case, it's gonna be hard to know exactly what was there. So we hold each case on its own merits, and this case had its public hearings and board comment, and a vote was held. And I think, you know, we're moving forward with that. So Mr. Guyer, can you give us an update as to what's transpired between the last time you were here and now?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Barry Geyer. I'm with Jones and Beach Engineers for the applicant. Since our last meeting, we have updated the plans to limit the proposed lot sizes to less than 45,000 square feet. Those plans are in front of you. I just want to apologize for the rev date, which didn't get updated. It actually did get updated, but it's a glitch that it didn't print out correctly, so that will be updated. The change in the lot sizes to less than 45,000, that increased the open space to 36.65 acres, where it was previously 34.92. We have provided the covenants to the town. We are still working to define the beach access and the location. The intent is to allow the homeowners to access the dock that's at the end of Moores Road. We're working with the attorneys and the survey to finalize that location. There was a question as to the monitoring of the open space. The applicant intends to retain the Southeast Land Trust to complete the monitoring. We've actually have a draft agreement from them to do that until such time as the HOA takes over. We are continuing to work with Fish and Game on the comments that they provided. Fish and Game gets to comment now, I don't know if you all know, because of state subdivision requirements. So any permit that we have to obtain from the state requires Fish and Game to provide input. Most of the items that they had asked for, we have already included, that there are limitations on fertilizer and other things in the open space, but they did ask for us to change the culvert replacement. We had proposed a dual 2-foot round culverts. We're gonna replace that with the 4-foot wide by 2-foot tall box culvert. And they asked for a 50-foot no-cut adjacent to vernal pools, which that's shown on the plans. And with that, I'll take any questions the board may have.
And for clarification, the Fish and Game process, is there anything binding within that process, or is it?
It's a good question. They make recommendations, and then the state reviewers are, as far as alteration of terrain or state subdivision, they're supposed to be able to look at those and decide whether they're applicable or not. But right now, so we won't get anything back from Fish and Game saying, yes, you're good to go, I guess is what we're saying.
So I know one of the, in reading through those comments about the larger buffer around some of the vernal pools, the very large vernal pool is well out of that range. It's not being proposed to be anything near it in the open space plans. And some of the others, it sounded like it was gonna be well access and things like that, were gonna be required for the
Yeah.
vegetation
We actually included that in the plan, so if you look on 2A, C2A, you can kind of see the, I guess it's more of a orange line adjacent to lots 2, 3, and 4. That's the 50-foot setback that we're including.
Okay, so the green line around that is the 25-foot?
Correct.
Alana, did you have that?
I could show it on the board too, if that helps. It shows up, I know. You see that's the 50-foot setback one.
That you're proposing that to remain vegetated?
What was that? I'm sorry.
So, I mean, I see by notes, vernal pool, no cut buffer, so you're proposing to keep that as a vegetated,
Correct, vegetative buffer.
with probably some kind of signage proposed?
Yeah, we have to install placards, conservation or no-cut
That explains
placards.
what it is.
Yep.
Along without the R, the first one.
Here,
G-I-E-R,
number one.
if you're doing,
I'm sorry, was there any other items between that? So we have declaration of covenants that's been, proposed, the HOA documents. You have separate HOA documents proposed, and those are pending?
Correct.
Those are pending to discussion about beach access?
Correct.
And limitations there. I'm not familiar with, I did not drive down when we had the site walk to see where that could come out potentially for beach access. And I know there's discussion about parking and all that would be addressed in those covenants.
Correct.
Or in the documents. The town may also add no parking signage up. You know, obviously, not a big fan of just the town having to put signs up everywhere. But I guess that they'll have that option. That'd be a select board and road agent decision, and police chief decision, if it became a problem. Is there any other board, questions or comments based upon the revised plans or any of the information that's been provided to us tonight?
Mr. Guyer, I looked through the homeowners association document, and I remember in a previous, draft that there was a language about no fertilizers, no commercial fertilizers, and only wood ash and lime, I think. But I don't see it in this one.
I will clarify and make sure that that is included.
Oh, okay, and I think the language in 4.8, the use of herbicides or pesticides on the common property shall be minimized. I'm sorry I left my drafts at home, but I thought the language was a little stronger than that.
And-
If you could double
And I
check.
think I have the latest draft, but 4.8 says there should be no use of herbicides or pesticides within 50 foot of wetland boundaries.
4.8?
Yeah.
Oh, then this must be an old draft then.
And then, do you have 5.2 under wetlands? That just clarifies that again. There shall be no use of herbicides or pesticides within 50 foot of wetland boundaries, and clearing and grading shall be kept to a minimum within 50 feet of a wetland boundary. And
I'm probably looking at an old draft then. It's
5.21 is, yeah, fertilizing limestone and wood ash shall be the only fertilizer used.
Okay, thank you.
But I will make sure that's in the final draft if somehow it got moved.
Mr. Guy, in the covenants that, I think it's just proposed language, because there were covenants, like warranty deed for a different subdivision, but is this just the proposed language that's gonna, it should be there, that you submitted?
Say that again?
The covenant language that
Yep.
you gave us, it's for a different town, but was that just kinda like just like a general idea of what would be utilized?
Correct, and it's possible that I provided you with the wrong one.
Okay, so we would obviously just need the
Yeah.
correct set. And then the fish and game report, rare turtles, that piece there, would that go into the plan set and be recorded?
Correct, the rare turtles, they'll get included, the pictures of them will get included on the cover sheet with the language regarding if we find them, who to contact, and that's all a requirement of all the state permits. So the only, well, we need 2 state permits, we need the state subdivision permit and the wetland permit.
Okay. And there's nothing, so that doesn't go on the Mylar though, that gets recorded?
No, they don't go on them, they'll go on, the C1,
And then
or CS.
and again, I apologize if this has been already stated, is there any language gonna be in like the deeds or the covenants or anything that the homeowners would understand? They didn't pull a plan to see, to see what these are, what's, what some of the reasoning for these items are in there, is the protection of these, is there anything like that that's proposed for the deeds, or?
Just what Fish and Game is requiring us, but we can include that language as well in there.
Okay. I think that's something Ms. Mooney had brought up before.
Did you want to make a comment about the input we received from the road agent and fire chief?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, I was gonna bring that up.
Yes, thank you, did not mean to overlook. So we had requested, feedback or response, formal response from the fire chief regarding the applicant's position. So the applicant was proposing a cistern on Moores Road to serve the 9 new houses, and then to sprinkle the 2 on Jamsa. The fire chief's position that they've written to us is any more than 1 house being added to Jamsa, that the fire chief wants to see a cistern added. So that's something the board can discuss. I think the applicant made your position pretty clear on no desire to add a cistern to Jamsa for the 2 houses over there. As a board, we take into account our department's input. We're not beholden to it, to my knowledge. There's other things that are out of our hands with building permits and things like that in unprotected areas that could potentially come up. but that's again, outside this board, and I'm not suggesting that that's the case or anything, so.
Did he give a rationale for wanting a cistern rather than sprinklers?
I don't believe there's any additional language other than
But
specifically stating.
the input I got from the chief was that because of the lack of supply of water out there, that was the reason he was requiring a 30,000 gallon capacity cistern on Jamsa. If there were more than one lot, on Morse Road.
So it's almost like a, not an offset exaction, but it's almost like a, potential to be where sometimes when you have a subdivision and you're looking at infrastructure within a town, you looked at, you know, add protection in areas that don't have it now. Where a cistern potentially could do that for more of the residents instead of the two, but again, it's, this board's purview on that. I don't take light of any of, you know, the chief's time or comments or try to minimize anything there, but it is, again, it's a balance. So I want the board to have a discussion on it, and I think it'd be up to us to make a call. So we can either hash through that now, or we can go over the road agent's comments and then try
I
to.
think we're talking about safety issues, not only for the proposed lots and homes, but also the existing residents, so that's my opinion. I think fire chief's considering a lot of factors.
And to be honest, I don't know where the nearest cistern is on Mountain Road or where the nearest house is on Jamsa after this, this subdivision. You know, Mr. Guyer, where I think we talked about this before, again, like how far down Jamsa the next houses or how many houses are beyond,
No, I don't off the top of my head, sorry. But I believe it's a good hike down to the next houses.
I would think that a individual property owner's insurance company would make a decision about the type of premium that they would have to pay if they only had sprinklers or they were near a cistern.
in general, a cistern, in my understanding of it and my knowledge, working knowledge of it, is that non-pressurized water source is considered unprotected. Still,
Is that right? Oh, interesting.
and you're beyond 5 miles from a fire department, it's considered unprotected. So you have two things, there may be other standards out there, but I'm talking ISO, protection classes for insurance rating.
Well, with all due respect to Chief Philchuk, I think that 2 houses on Jamsa with sprinklers only would be adequate.
I'll agree with Sue on that.
I think it's overkill, you know, and something that needs to be maintained down the road and
The cost-effective.
cost effective.
There is even a good-sized pond located right across the street in Raymond, across from Morris Road, where you see the Mountain Road Trading Post is. There is a fairly good-sized water hole if emergency access needed to be obtained water quickly, which wouldn't be very far for them to go. It's not even 300 yards maybe.
That depends.
If it's the time of year. Sure. Well, you can say, I mean, we've been around long enough that 90% of the time there's water in there. And we had a little drought this time, but I'm using that just as a theory that there is a water hole there.
Yeah, I'm looking at, so I guess for this specific
There's also a swamp right there.
plan, and then looking what's around it, so there's not gonna be any future build out to the southwest of this, on Jamsa. Nothing on the opposite side of Jamsa, because that's all being proposed is open space or easement. so it seems like for this area,
Yeah, the only possible development would be on Sax's Road,
correct.
where that was a potential development that we looked at that never came through.
There was one approved for,
Yeah, he put the lots that, all the lots went on Mountain Road.
yeah, yeah.
But if, since Sax's Road now is an approved town road, which it wasn't at the time of that development purpose, now that he still stands at a possibility for later, but if that did, then there would be a cistern put in most likely for that new development, so down the road, again, we're not seeing the future here, but that's why I think sprinklers would be adequate just for these, instead of, if nothing ever happens, it saves the town money in the long run.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I guess we could make a formal motion that, to allow sprinkler, or we just can just move forward with, the plan and just include that in any kind of final motion that comes up.
Mr. Chair, I move for case number 22-011-SUB, that's installing sprinklers on the 2 residences along Jamsa Trail would be adequate.
In lieu of a cistern.
Instead of a cistern, a 30K cistern.
Is there any second to that?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? So this is not approving the plan. This is specifically just as helping us move forward, with discussion. Is there any further discussion on that? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? That motion carries, 4 aye, 1 0 abstention. All right, second item was, road agent input, specifically so we'd had input before about Moore's Road, or the town had, and the applicant had done some work initially to upgrade Moore's Road to get it to a certain standard. No such work has occurred on Jamsa, and the road agent's, comments were such that they feel that there would be upgrades needed based on the current conditions of that road. I'm trying to find the exact verbiage that was given to us.
Is Jamsa a town road now?
Yep.
Is, so there was 2 questions, I'm sorry, 2 questions, but the road agent had a couple of comments. One was about the current condition of Jamsa, feels like there's improvements that would be needed. He's also, not certain that if this road has been surveyed and if this is where it is where the town has basically accepted it as. I believe, Mr. Guy, I think you've touched on that in the past, or that's why, I think that is why you mentioned doing an easement for the entire, basically, western boundary of Jamsa, was to
Yeah,
allow for clarification,
our plans show Jamsa and the location that it currently exists.
Yep.
There is no right-of-way that was included with the acceptance of Jamsa as a public road. But this subdivision will formalize the location. If you look on A1, it shows the line that Jamsa right-of-way will occupy, I guess, which is from the east side of Jamsa Trail to the property boundary. It's in excess of what's required for the road, really, but if we don't do it this way, you create weird little parcels, so it's just better to give the whole area from west of Jamsa to the town, and if the town ever wants to improve it or something else with that, then they have the right-of-way available.
so that was gonna be like an easement to the town?
It's right-of-way, yes.
So, are you saying between Jamsa Trail and Sax's Road?
Not quite Saks, but you're close. Our property line doesn't quite go all the way to Saks Road.
Goes pretty close to it.
It's certain spots it goes really close, but we're giving all that property on that west side as a right-of-way. So in the future, if the town wants to combine those two, That's a possibility.
Oh, yeah. That doesn't.
So that was just me brainstorming my own, so I wanna keep my public comments, my comments to myself, but
So I know with like, when there's easements given to the town, we've had this in some other situations where when a road is less than the standard width, we required some languages or some easements to be given or to be offered to the town, basically, to allow for a proper right-of-way to be set in the future. So I know easements have to get, even if the board takes final action on these plans, the easement language, has to get proposed to the board of selectmen, because we can't accept land on behalf of the town or anything like that, so it.
Well, it's still a right-of-way, like you would accept for any other road that was,
Right.
designed.
And that right-of-way area is not included in the calculation of the open space.
Correct, correct.
Sorry, it's been a number of meetings.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'd like to reconfirm some of those topics, as they come up. So I don't know if everybody's here on this part. When we did the site walk, we came out on Jamsa Trail, and walked a small section of that. I've driven a section, the first section of this down to the proposed lots. It's definitely narrow and hilly, sightlines aren't great in some of the areas. I think where the two proposed lots are is obviously was in a flatter area of that, without, a flatter and straighter area of that road. Improvements, I think we'd have to weigh the balance of improvements to the road based on what's being proposed, and specifically what kind of impact would be involved. So if you look at where Jamsa is now, the topography, the amount of wetlands that are surrounding it, you would have definitely, quite a bit of dredge and fill or cut and fill being done. And so I'm not certain that, in my opinion, I'm not certain the benefit is there.
I'm not
Based on
following what
the
you're
use.
saying.
About, do we require or propose to require any kind of improvements to Jamsa, as part of the subdivision?
Well, based on what the Director of Public Works is saying, basically is he's concerned that increased traffic on the road, along with narrow spots, poorly drained areas, steep descents, and climbs along with blind spots will cause future costs to the town of Nottingham. Since the roads were never designed for increased traffic.
Correct, yeah, like it's originally camp road. Mr. Guy, as of right now, there was no proposed changes to Jamsa being,
Correct, with
Being
just the
offered.
2 lots, we're not proposing any improvements to JAMSA.
If Jamsa was not a town road, could they even propose those lots?
no, it would have to go through, get it, in the past, when on any private road that didn't have frontage on class 5 road, had to go to zoning for, variance.
So because this is an approved town road now, the town's gonna have the burden of maintaining it once houses are built out there.
The town's already maintaining the road as it is, doesn't matter if the houses were there or not.
I thought that they hadn't done anything to the road.
Oh, we still plow it and sand it.
They haven't, the town hasn't,
Maintaining it.
hasn't done anything, but the town.
Drop rocks and stones, filling potholes, I mean, not very often, but we do. No one's gonna tell you something that we're doing tremendous amount of work on it, but we're maintaining it.
But the road agent is saying that we're gonna have to do more with houses out
Well, the road agent believes that we're gonna have to do more on every single road in town.
there. Okay,
It's just he's just pointing out this particular road.
And I'm just gonna make an obvious comment that that's the price of development. really.
Yeah, cause every road development we do, eventually we are gonna have to seal coat, we're gonna have to retop the road, we're gonna have to I mean, it's just inevitable on the age of a road, so any development that was done 20 years ago, we're going to be resealing the top of it with town money to redo it. It's just part of, if the culvert breaks or goes bad, town isn't fixing it, it's just another road in town that we have to maintain. And with any of these, never mind.
And there was nothing necessarily quantitative in the comments that say if it, you know, so we have our road standards. If this was a new road going in, we have roadway standards right away with type, you know, pavement, drainage, you know, slope, all those pieces. It's when we have existing roads that are not up to standards where we have to consider, do we require any improvements to them based on the subdivision being proposed? And when I say quantitative, nothing from the road agents directly specified, like if there was a specific part of JAMSA that's a concern that they'd like to see addressed. Sometimes you just have an area of impingement that's there, and they said they'd like to see that changed or cleaned up or widened, or add a culvert here, or do this there. So in this, it was more of a general comment, is my interpretation of it. Saying that this road right now isn't up to any kind of town standard. It is a town road now, so that any.
Just note, the town does not have a set standard for their pre-existing roads. The only standard we have is on brand-new roads being built. And with the, I'll say it now that I wasn't gonna say it before, but with the fact of this property, if the lines are correct and it does access Sax's Road, who says down the road that this part of JAMSA, which is the trouble spot, doesn't go away and the access becomes off Sax is the only road off Mountain Road? Not saying it's gonna happen, just throwing it out there as a possibility. Thinking ahead.
Sure.
Get rid of a trouble spot and make a nice, easier access for everybody.
I have a random thought. I'm surprised that people who live in these areas where private roads are now town roads, they haven't gone forward with a petition to offer some protection and have them categorized as scenic roads in town.
Well, I mean, some of these roads have been in existence for 70 years or getting close to maybe over 100 years.
That doesn't preclude a petition warrant article
Sure.
to place roads or sections of roads into scenic road protection.
Sue, great idea.
Great
I
idea.
never thought about
Glad
it. I'll be
I don't
happy
live there.
I'll be happy to ask that question.
So I guess before we act on this,
Right.
you know, I wanna make sure that there are people in the audience, so I'd wanna open the public hearing part of it in case anybody was speaking specifically towards JAMSA or might live on the JAMSA portion of it, being a butter. But was there any other comments from the board at this juncture? If not, I'll go ahead and, open the public hearing. So again, the way the public hearing works, is anybody that'd like to speak for the application, please come forward first, against, or just general questions, come up after. But just identify yourself, please direct all your comments towards the board. We may not be able to answer right away, sometimes we take a list and answer it after, but please come on up. And for or against general questions, it's, you can come on up, please.
Eric Desolate, 19 South Road, Nottingham. What I asked earlier is, I know there was some issues with Lamprey River and all that. Has that been all settled?
With the, so when we had sent this as the Development of Regional Impact and had a request, we sent an option for comment for the Lamprey River Advisory Committee. We originally received some comment back and haven't received anything since, based on any updated plans or the wildlife studies and items that we were provided by the applicant.
And the Raymond, is that all settled?
So, the Raymond Planning Board held a public hearing on this as well as part of the Development of Regional Impact designation. It allows, that designation allows comment from whatever towns we designate or whatever entities we designate. They have no other formal say necessarily. They can't impose any standards or conditions. So they provided some comments back that basically if this was a new road in their town, they would require some kind of turnaround at the town line. So they gave us that information. We kind of discussed that at the last public hearing, as to, do we try to require some kind of lollipop turnaround right near the town line, or kind of allow it to be further down the road? And it seems like the way the plowing situation is now,
They turn around at the horse farm.
they turn around the horse farm, or it's our town plows it, or their town plows
Yeah.
further down, and it's in the bus, picks up at the end of the road versus coming down the road. We, at this point in time, have not had any, I'm not setting kind of requirement like that for the applicant.
Okay. Now, was all the water testing finished? That hydro testing or whatever it was called?
Go back and double check, so let me make a note on that, and when the applicant comes back up, I'll ask him on that one. I'll confirm.
And, I mean, there's gonna be, we've discussed this before about the usage on the road. Moore's Road is junk right now. I mean, it's just junk. It's a skating rink because the town hasn't sanded it in 4 or 5 days, but, adding all these cars is just gonna kill these roads. I mean, you update them now, but you add 20, 30, 40 cars, and it's just gonna beat up the road that much more.
Yeah.
I mean, if there was 40 more cars going down Moore's Road right now, it'd be impassable. I mean, people would be taken out, they'd ruin their vehicle. So I don't know if anybody's thought about that. I mean,
We'll bring it back to the board. I know there's been some discussion previously, but I'll bring it back to the board, once we close the public hearing and make sure that those two items are, that we discuss them again.
so in the water testing, you don't know about, you're gonna check on it.
I'll get an answer. We'll confirm that tonight, whether or not we even required it. I have to go back through my notes and see if we required a hydrogeologic study or not,
Well, I'm pretty sure you did, but,
and then just check with the applicant as well.
okay. That's all I can think of at the moment.
Thanks, sir. Is there any other comment from the public?
Yes, Dmitry Teleganov, 5 South Road. I have just a basically generic question. If something were to go wrong due to this subdivision and development, let's say groundwater bed goes lower than it is now and people need to drill their wells even deeper. So who is gonna be responsible for these kind of things if this is caused by, if it's determined that it's caused by the development? And just as an example, if something else goes wrong because of that, who's gonna be fixing it? Is it town or owners themselves, or is it who, the development association that's gonna be fixing that? So nobody.
It's gotta be the homeowner's responsibility.
So, I think if you could link a direct cause, someone else, there's potential, for recourse, not through the town, it would be through probably legal action. Any of those kind of permits, wells, septic systems, those get permitted by the state, at the state level. We do have generally larger lots than a lot of towns. Part of that's because of, we know that it's all, wells and septics to try to account and allow for plenty of, capacity there. And, I think with the applicant's proposal of maintaining a lot of area of undisturbed space, to try to minimize any impact like that, but I'll let the applicant, comment on that as well when they come back up. And same thing, if any blasting were to occur, not that any is being proposed, but that's usually a question that comes up as well. That goes back to the blasting company. They usually have very set conditions as to standards and things that they do pre and post, any kind of blasting commencing, to try to prevent any kind of damage to that and as well as current structures.
Yeah, I understand, like, during the construction, yes, but like down the road, things like more delayed causes, let's put it this way, so. Okay.
Thank you. Is there any other?
Just a quick question. So, if people's wells started drying up after this development was put in, there's no one we can hold responsible?
Right, didn't necessarily say that, but it I'm not a lawyer, so I don't wanna step out too outside the bounds. It was proposed, one way it was mentioned, like, if something was tied directly, it could be directly tied back to a specific property owner, landowner as a cause. There's probably some kind of legal recourse that could occur. But again, there's a pretty wide variability of, in the groundwater resources in town, and so cause and effect, is sometimes difficult to place.
Like if our water change went from good to bad right after the development went put in, wouldn't that be the development's fault?
So that would be something that would probably be addressed to the Department of Environmental Services at the state level. The state actually controls groundwater resources. We have some ordinances to protect our groundwater resources, but ultimately that is an item that is protected by the state and regulated by the state. So those kind of things, again, we have our zoning ordinance in our subdivision regulations to try to minimize any potential negative impacts to current landowners, but I guess I don't want to get stuck in hypotheticals. But the recourse would be most likely through the state action. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, I'll close the public hearing. It's 8:11. Mr. Guyer, welcome you to come back up, please. So I don't know if my notes from those, if you'd like to touch upon any of them. I think there was a question about any kind of hydrologic testing, if any has been completed, if any's been proposed, how to potentially minimize any kind of negative impact to Moore's Road based on increased traffic. And then, if you're welcome to talk about any kind of groundwater item if you.
So as far as the utilities, the project will follow all the state and local regulations regarding the wells. And that's, regulated by the state, as you said. So we're following all those requirements. We did not do a hydrogeological study. I believe the board voted that wasn't required. We did complete a drainage study, and that's why we're replacing the culvert under Moore's Road. As to the state of Moore's Road, I know the applicant worked with the town road agent to improve that road in the recent past, and we're not proposing any additional improvements to it at this time. It is a town road, the town voted to take it.
I know, same thing with JAMSA, I mean, the town accepted it as is, based on current conditions and what was there, and so any, just like any other road, any additional increase to them, that's when we kinda look at it again. Sometimes we require more, sometimes we just, we don't, so. I know you mentioned improving the culvert, and that, is that shown, the new culvert size, or did it just mention that it was being replaced?
Nope, it's shown on sheet C3B.
That's what it is, yeah. Yep, perfect. 4x2, yep. And again, the box culvert was in response to Fish and Game requesting a
Yeah,
large
yeah.
depth culvert for,
We proposed
Planning circles.
dual 24-inch culverts. They asked for something a little bit larger, so 4x2, same volume, but bigger opening for turtles to sneak through.
yeah, specifically the Blandings turtles. So that brings it back to the board, for discussion. So we should take action. I feel like we should make some kind of formal action. So we have road agents' comments about JAMSA. Again, taking votes on things, I think is a good practice, just to make sure it's captured. But would anybody like to make any kind of motion regarding, should we, or would anybody like to have discussion about anything specific to JAMSA Trail and the current conditions and any improvements thereupon? Seeing none, anybody like to make a motion whether or not any improvements should be conducted on JAMSA as a requirement of this? Or I guess we could just capture it in any kind of final motion. If there were conditions, we would bring them up at that point.
Are there going to be some notes about Morris Road, groundwater as well, recorded?
Yeah, so, so right now I'm addressing JAMSA Trail since we had a road agent's comments on that. We did not have any new comments from the road agent regarding Moore's Road that I'm aware of. Moore's Road was improved to a certain level, for the town to take final acceptance of it. They met those standards. The proposed houses are all, for the most part, at the beginning of Moore's Road, except for two that are closer to South Road.
It seems to me that the comments that we've seen or we've received from our Director of Public Works are are not specific. They're more, it's more of a general statement that kind of covers, and I think he does actually say in parentheses, lake roads. So I'm just wondering if maybe he has specific concerns about Moore's or JAMSA, something specific he can give us, other or not. It seems that the comments we've received from him are somewhat generic to lake roads.
Yeah, and I think the two are a bit different. JAMSA has had no improvements that I'm aware of, whereas Moore's Road has had some
Right.
widening and improvements, and the culvert's gonna be replaced in this one. So again, I think
Although
we
his,
requested the comment from the road agent, and what we got back is what we got back, so I think we can be, in the future, we can be better about our requests for specifics.
What about him showing up at one of these meetings?
So we can't require any, so the comment was, or question was, and I'm gonna try to cut off anything from the public at this point. So but there was a question about a road agent showing up for the meetings. That's nothing we can require as a board, that any of our personnel, the town employees, appear before us. We do seek their input, but that's not even a requirement. That's something that we do, is
As a
kind of
courtesy.
best practice and a courtesy. It generally helps the applicants along, helps the town and the board, in reviewing and making determinations. But ultimately, all of these decisions fall upon this board.
so I'll take back what I said. I realized at the beginning of his comments do say, using Jamsa Trail will require road improvements. So it does specifically
Okay.
say Jamsa, yeah.
But it doesn't specifically say what
What?
those should be. And I would hope that any developer on a town road such as this would work with the road agent so they could collaborate and come up with solutions that work for everybody.
I agree.
So the biggest thing, I think the biggest disturbance is obviously when these go to be built. So that's when you're gonna see that, so the town already has a possibility to post some roads for no trucking, for, not no trucking, but,
Weight
weight
limit.
limits on roads for certain seasons. I would expect that to occur on these two roads, which would limit building time. So obviously, you know, they don't want large commercial vehicles coming down, during mud season. And if anything was to occur, I'm sure the town would look to the developer to rectify that at that time. But again, that's usually done through the town, beyond this board. I don't think that's necessarily something we have to, would add as a condition necessarily. Especially because we don't know if they're gonna be built right away, or they could be phased out and sold off in now, in years from now, once approved. If approved. All right, so I think, unless there's anything else from the applicant or the board, I mean, we've had this before us for quite a while, there's no set time limit on it necessarily. I think we've gotten to the point where everything we've asked for, we've had responses to. It seems like we're at a point of final action on this, one way or the other. Unless there's something that is pretty substantive that we wanna see changed. But I think where we're at now is this is at a point for some kind of final action.
Mr. Guy, what's the timeline for starting development on this project?
He's not in a hurry, let's just put it that way. There is no construction proposed except for the building of the houses, so, well, except for the culvert. So that wouldn't occur until, later in the summer or potentially fall. But, my understanding from speaking with Mr. Rossborough, he's not in a hurry.
Just thinking of the animals that live in the wetlands, springtime would be a nice time not to do anything, but once raising the offspring and they fledged and whatever, summer to fall might be better for a start time.
Especially vernal pools in the spring, you know,
Definitely.
around Big Night and things like that.
Yeah, we still have the wetland, permit to obtain from the state, and
Okay.
they may most likely put a restriction on the timing of the construction.
We have somebody in the audience with a hand up.
All right, I'll entertain, so the public hearing is technically closed. I'm gonna allow one more comment. but then I have to, if it's closed, we have to close it and honor the applicant and the board, but, go ahead, sir.
So, about the hydro testing,
Correct.
I remember after we did the walk, that's when it was brought up. So,
I remember it was,
I know it was discussed by you guys and other people. It just, I don't know if a decision was ever made on that, but I know it was something that we were all talking about.
so I remember, so, back to the hydrologic testing, I know we specifically discussed it, but we never made it a requirement. So that's one of those studies that's optional, in most cases. There's some cases where it is required, usually in the Aquifer district, but we did not require it. So the applicant had no duty to do such a test or provide us with, such results. Mr. Guy, I was going back through, just looking at the, on the plans, it looks like granite bounds are in the front, but then iron pins in the back. I don't believe we had a waiver. Normally, it's granite bounds at at all corners.
Yeah, I believe we had a waiver request for iron pins in the back.
I wanted to make sure.
It's been quite a way of time since we originally submitted this, but I'm fairly certain we had submitted a waiver request for iron pins in the back.
Just double check, I just want to make sure that if that's what's proposed, that, just make sure, again, that we have it all, everything in order. Lana, do you happen to have a copy of that by any chance, from,
Or it might be in
Go, yeah, go to that.
I apologize, this is because we took action on things at different meetings.
Waiver request.
This is the one.
here it is.
No, it's for the monuments. Just trying to see if we have, Mr. Haney's, usually in his reports, as he updates them when we get revisions, he usually checks off what we've already taken action on.
I don't find in my notes, Mr. Chairman, that we ever took action on the waiver.
You are finding it, you're not
I
finding it?
did not find that we took action on the waiver.
Got the conditional use permits. Those are on 12/14.
I don't remember what meeting. It would have been a December meeting. They didn't.
Yeah, so on December 14th, that's when we took action on the conditional use permits. I do not have any notes on that night that we addressed a waiver. There's nothing mentioned. there was nothing mentioned on that night either. And that's the last notes I have with me. So I think for clarity, I think we should address that, if iron, so the applicant looks like they're proposing the granite bounds for the, so these are mostly rectangular lots, so proposing granite bounds along the right-of-way, and then, in some of the corners, specifically where it's abutting different property, like in Raymond, and then iron pins for the back portions, and then some additional granite bounds where there's like a shared driveway. Mr. Guy, what's the reason for for that? I might say it in the waiver, and I apologize.
It's really, the granite bounds in the front are obvious for the right-of-way, it makes it clear, but for the remainder of the locations, it's easier and less expensive to put in iron pins, and they're just as effective, typically, we find.
So, my only concern potentially would be, obviously, this is an open space plan, so there's monitoring that's gonna be involved. With the monitoring side of it, is it easier to monitor when granite bounds are in the field versus, iron pins? That would be my only, major concern with the difference between the two.
Well, certainly the granite bounds are much more visible, but the iron pins can be presented in such a way so they have height, they're marked with tape, they have little buttons on top that are different colors.
And we cap them all now, that indicates the company that set the cap, and
There's numbers and
Can go flag them as
identifiers
well.
on them.
And are the caps fairly robust, or does wildlife do that?
no, they stay around. The caps go down and they gotta get hammered on, so they don't get lost.
Yeah, no, I was more worried about if they're plastic and you have,
So
rodents chewing them.
was it completely instead of the granite bounds, or were there just certain areas that,
It's basically the
Made
back of
more
the
sense.
lots, we put in pins, the front of the lots, we put in granite bounds.
okay, all right, then, thank you.
So on this, it's again, it's up to the board. Do we have a waiver request to act on? On other plans, we've required granite, except for, we've done pins sometimes if there's a specific reason with the topography or the field conditions, or along the property, boundaries where it's a long line, you can do pins in between instead of bounds, but again, so we have a waiver request and action on it is required. It's, I'll read the waiver. It's a request, I, Jim Roseborough, submit a waiver to the town of Nottingham subdivision regulations, Article 11, Section 8, for the above case submittal to allow, rear property bounds to be iron pins in lieu of granite bounds.
Mr. Chairman, I move for case number 22-011-SUB, a waiver request submitted by the applicant that would relieve them of Article 11, Section 8, to allow the rear areas of the boundaries marked with iron pins instead of granite bounds.
Second,
So I have a motion by Ms. Mooney, a second by Mr. Anderson. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries, 4-1.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So that brings us back to, where we're at on this. So again, I think now that we've addressed, so we had 3 conditional use permits, all have been addressed. We had a waiver request that's now officially been addressed, and approved. We've had a general motion by the board about, allow sprinklers in lieu of a cistern for the 2 on Jamsa. think at this point, we're at a point again where final action, either, some kind of conditional approval or denial, one way or the other, I think is, unless we have something else to request of the applicant that's specific and substantive, I think that's where we're at. And again, open discussion, so if someone else feels differently, please speak up.
So the items that are outstanding, just from clarification, for Fish and Game, was that still outstanding as far as that approval, or was that all?
Well, we have to work through fishing, so Fish and Game doesn't give you a permit, they make recommendations which are reviewed by the state subdivision and the wetlands permit. So we're still required to obtain our state subdivision permit and our wetland permit, so the Fish and Game recommendations will be reviewed by those other state agencies and made sure they're made. So it's not necessary for the board, this board, to say you have to, you know, make the or do the recommendations per Fish and Game, because those will be covered by the other state permits. Any conditions of approval will need to include both the state subdivision permit and the wetland permit.
Hey, one quick question. I know before you went back and had to revise the plans a little bit, there were like rain gardens proposed to in lieu of larger drainage structures. Is that on C2? Or is that what that's the 4K areas, I believe?
Yeah, no, they're located on C3, well, they're most visible on C3A and C3B.
There they are, yeah.
They're the
So the
oval
spaces.
areas, yep. And then we have the detail that depicts the typical rain garden.
The only thing I would say is maybe call those out, or obviously the cistern is kind of similar in shape and size for those, but it may be called out in the
That's, yeah,
drainage notes specifically, and I think it is called out in C3A, which is what you had just mentioned, so we should be okay there. So kind of the notes I have, Mr. Guy had also submitted an email to us to try to capture what his understanding of where we might be at on this. And from my notes, this matches up generally with what ours are, so standard town conditions, that's usually, again, plans and seals appropriately, the Mylars with seals and signatures, all fees paid. An additional one we usually list is monument set, and we have a monument form, that certification form that usually comes in. So that's usually an additional conditional item. Update plans, so any revisions, make correct updates, revision dates. Depict the location of the beach, that's one thing we haven't necessarily talked about again at level. And we don't have the HOA or covenants that are gonna discuss what that access is gonna look like. Include approved CUP notation on the plans, again, that's standard. HOA documents provided and reviewed by town council, it would be, these are the applicant's specific notes, and I'm adding to them. If we were to use something like this, it's reviewed and approved, because review, come back with a bunch of notes, but if you just say reviewed, then it was, well, they reviewed it, it met the standard. So approved would be by council or this board. Sometimes it's back and forth. One thing is usually separating covenants and the HOA separate, referencing each other, but having them standalone documents. And then state permits, that's usually subdivision, wetlands, and the like. I'm trying to think if we had any other conditions that we should address. If there is a motion with any kind of conditions, I think we should address if any additional improvements are gonna be required to Jamsa or Moore's as part of this. If we do not address it, then that means none are required. Was there any other discussion by the board about the beach? And it was brought up a few times, beach access. again, the landowner has deeded access to that, and it seems like they can legally deed access to other people, is my understanding of it. And it sounds like originally, it sounds like what's being proposed is that these house lots, at least on Moores, will have deeded access to that beach area. But there will be language specified in the covenants, about parking along Moores Road. Speaking correctly, Mr.
That is correct.
It's a boat ramp.
Yeah, it's not a beach,
Right,
but
it's
it's water
access
access.
to
So what,
boat.
Right.
Yeah, lake access, yeah.
so I guess a clarified language is lake access.
I'd probably just use lake access, cause it's not sandy, it's rough, it's,
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the application 22-011-SUB with the standard fees and conditions, including, and I have a bunch of them here, report from New Hampshire Fish and Game for their review, applications from DES on the wetlands permits, the state subdivision permits, clarification in the deed for lake access and possible parking area. And I'd also like to include that the applicant work with our Public Works Department for improvements on Jamsa Trail, if those are necessary.
And also, I would recommend discussing the HOA documents provided and approved.
Yes, the
As well as
HOA
declaration.
documents be provided to our council for their review. And also that information about the access to the lake be included in the documents as well,
And declaration of covenants.
and permits,
I'm sorry, declaration of covenants.
and declaration of covenants.
And standard town conditions are the one things we mentioned earlier, but I'd like to make it clear. Plans have all seals, and all the plans be submitted as required. Mylars with appropriate seals and signatures, all fees paid, monument set, monument certification. And then any plan updates with correction to revision dates, those minor items that we mentioned earlier.
Thank you.
We have a motion by Ms. Mooney. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Anderson. Is there any further discussion?
Can I just make a comment? The issue regarding JAMSA is too vague, because the road agent could come back and say it has to be a highway. Not that he would, but with the vagary of that approval, it's very difficult to meet that standard. He could set whatever standard he wants at that point. So I would just suggest that the board either clarify that statement or remove that condition, I guess. It's just too vague to me, because they could have a disagreement about what needs to be done, and the road agents could say it needs to meet town standards. And now that the board has voted on it, that we'd have to come back to try to amend that.
So Ms. Moon, what was the exact verbiage, do you remember, that you utilized?
That the applicant work with Public Works Department.
Right, and I think
And that just
he's
just
gonna
means
be reasonable,
communication.
he's not going to ask for.
But
something
as
outlandish.
vague as that is, I mean, the statement that the road agent wrote to the board was vague enough that we couldn't determine what needed to be done. So, I have all confidence in the road agent. I'm just saying that when you leave a condition that vague, it's very difficult to meet. And it could put was right back here talking to you guys again.
So what if we were to put the word something like minor improvements or minor?
But that needs to be defined as well.
Yeah.
Are you willing to take a general comment to those sort of typical conditions? Not what's specific about this project.
Keep it clean, so So, to the applicant's point, you know, I don't wanna continue too long when we have a motion and a second and really kind of have to lock down the comment to the board level. I think we do have to be careful, and I've seen this in language from NHMA about being specific sometimes where you leave it to a town department or a town head, say, and approval by the town police chief. Well, the town police chief says they don't want it, then all of a sudden it's not approved because, you know, everything else is met, but there's some criteria that they choose not to, and I'm just picking on a department. So again, I think if we say that, the way it's worded now, and we go to sign plans for final approval, and everything else is met, I think we would just be looking for input between the board, that department and the applicant as to what they've discussed, or if there's been additional items that they would like to, that change, but I wouldn't see that holding up a final approval. It is vague, and working with is just, my opinion, it's communicating and potentially making a few changes. Because anything substantive would require new plans and would require a new public hearing. So if there's something substantive occurring through that discussion that changed the plans, that would require a whole new public hearing. So I wouldn't foresee anything like that coming out of that.
Okay, so to that effect, I'm gonna withdraw that comment that the applicant and the Public Works Department work together on Jansen Trail.
Ms. Mooney is proposing to amend her motion to remove that specific language from her motion.
I'll amend my second.
And that's amended by Mr. Anderson. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Me,
The motion carries 4-1-0.
Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you, everybody, for, there's been a lot of meetings, and everybody's been very patient and professional, and I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
So no more meetings?
No more meetings. So so it's a conditional approval, the applicant, that, we didn't set a specific timeline, so our regulations set the timeline, so those conditions have to be met, usually it's 12 months. So the applicant has 12 months basically to meet all those conditions that were just set tonight, for final approval. That's it for the public hearings. The other item, we listed an item on the agenda for tonight. It was just, we've had some questions from an applicant of a conditionally approved case. It was case 22-009-SUB for Camo on Stevens Hill Road. It was a 2-lot subdivision. So they provided a Mylar, and I guess we had this on the agenda eventually. Just as a board, it's not a public hearing. This was not noticed, because it's, again, just to review the conditions, that we had set. Did you have those conditions by any chance, Lana?
Yeah, and they're also in the.
They are, okay, thank you. Well, got it. So the notice of decision, we had plan copies of professional seals and signatures. We've received those now, I believe, correct? Original Mylar with professional seals and signatures. There was a question, because I think the Mylar we received didn't have the wetland scientist stamp on it,
But that's okay.
but I guess it's okay. I've looked back at other plans. We've had some that have them and some don't. And we've required it in the past, so I think it's good to have that on the Mylars, but I guess the registry doesn't require them. All fees paid. Wetland restoration must be completed per the NHDES requirements. We'll come back to that. Outline and label the wetland impact and restoration area on the plans. Coordinate driveway permit with the town road agent and address concerns regarding utility pole, roadside ditches, and culverts. The non-permitted driveways to be abandoned, not used. The approved driveway pertains to proposal. The driveway runs along the north line of the wetland lot. Final plan to reflect a removal of double lines that show the existing driveway. Approval pertains to the subdivision plan updated on August 9th, 2022. A description of the road easement that will be granted to the township and provide looking for acceptance, so that's in the works. And deadline for completion of all conditions is by July 1st, 2023. The note must be added on the plans that states the deadline date and that no certificate of occupancy will be issued and if that deadline is not met. So, there's our conditions. The only thing, I guess, for me on this, if all the other items were met, is how do we handle that wetland restoration must be completed per NHDES requirements? It was something agreed to by the applicant when we approved this, conditionally approved it. But obviously that has not occurred as of this juncture. This was approved in October. And we gave them a July 1st deadline. So I think,
So just to kind of go over in summary, so I think we've kind of agreed that, well, assuming all the fees have been paid or will be, the plan-related edits have been made. The two that are outstanding are obviously the on-site work of the completion of the restoration and solidifying the easement, because that's a board of selectmen, so those are outside of our
the
control in terms of physical signing and review, so.
yeah, and the easement part is, can be, my understanding is that can be done
Yeah.
after this, because,
It is shown on the plan, so that's the primary goal, is it's directed.
the board could, the select board could deny it, not,
Or is it
not accept the
restoration
easement.
you're talking about?
It's both, so there's, I mean, I kinda looked at it as, you know, we oftentimes don't have this many conditions, so it's, I think part of it, there was a question of, you know, could we even sign the plan if the restoration wasn't done, and I think I've gone to where, and this might not be your case, but we've had cases in the past where somebody needs to finance the project and they can't do so until there's a signed plan that's in the registry that then the bank could take as, yeah, this is a lot, I can, and that might be the case that you're in is. Absolutely. Yeah, and so you're kind of the chicken before the egg in that scenario, so I think to your point of, I guess how to make sure that that's done, I think that, well, we say it right there, a certificate of occupancy, right, so it kind of falls on Dale. That he
He's the
can't
only one
issue the certificate of occupancy until that work has been completed. As part of that too, DES actually has to sign, like, they have to issue a memo saying that it was completed. Again, that's by that July 1st deadline, but, until the plan is signed, the finances to complete the work are not there.
Right, so again, the wetlands restoration was, even separate from subdivision, was a process that was already in the works, outside of the purview of this board and of this application, this specific case. I just don't know the way we can, reading the way we conditioned this. I understand the point being made that, without a final plan, you know, it can hold up certain funding. But that last item too, deadline for completion of all conditions by July 1st, and if, that deadline date.
I think the certificate of occupancy is
If
what
that,
protects
if that
us.
deadline is not met, so if they don't meet the deadline of restoring the wetlands, then they, and if they build a house, they can never occupy it, because we've precluded, which I know is.
Which would become more of an issue on the applicant at that point, because they've now financed a house that they can't live in, but they have to pay for it. So it's, I guess it's in their best interest to, if they wanna live in the house they're building, they have to meet the condition.
I mean, I don't wanna delay signing anything and hold up anything for anybody unnecessarily. Again, the way we condition this, and we set timelines specific to things happening, you know, I can reach out to council and get a response back, to see if these can be conditions subsequent, meaning after we sign the Mylar and they're done, so basically go towards the building inspector side of things. and request that we have response for the 8th. That's 2 weeks from tonight. It's our first meeting.
So can we?
At that point though, too, that's also saying that we wouldn't, until the road easement is accepted by the Board of Selectmen, we also couldn't, under that same interpretation.
Well, that it be provided to the board for acceptance, but it doesn't say that it has to be approved or accepted. So I know there has been some easement language drafted, but there were some edits, proposed, I think that came back from council just today. That's not from this board, so I saw a comment on that. So some changes to be made to those, so. Again, so if we sign the Mylars and they put this on file and they have this note on the plans, which I'd have to make sure that that note is on the plan, it's saying that if they don't meet all these things before July 1st, then regardless if they built or not, they're, which again, I guess goes to the
Then it goes to
building
code
inspector, and if they have
enforcement, right?
a
So
building
it's-
permit or not, if he issues a building permit or not, that,
In
They can't- they can
theory,
never
too,
occupy it.
If the wetland restoration wasn't done by July 1st, but they were working on the driveway, but they hadn't started that hypothetically, then the recourse there is that code enforcement, because we do have this condition, first of all, they would hold off the certificate of occupancy, but they can issue a cease and desist on the property at that point. It's an enforceable condition, for code enforcement, so. Especially if somebody's building a house that they didn't get permitted, it's a cease and desist. So yes, it falls on Dale. But he's the only one with the authority to issue that.
I have their certificate of monument installation also, which,
Okay, yeah, it's just good to have, we see it on file, yeah.
there's iron stakes.
There were some intermittent ones, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yep, I think we're good there.
Make sure I'm
Yep.
in the discussion.
thank you. So we actually have the road maintenance easement, it's a road maintenance easement deed, but, so there's some changes that were proposed to us that came back from council, to the town
So we'll just
today.
forward those
That's-
independently, right?
That's, already went to the select board through the town, town administrator.
Gotcha.
That's separate from us. I think we've
So
got,
can we be clear to people, what are we doing?
Well, the road easement and anything to do with the driveway or road easement, if that's not met, Dale won't issue a building permit.
Yeah, there's more,
So there's.
Or driveway
there are
permit,
Checks and
yeah.
balances.
there's
yeah.
two, yeah.
so what we're doing tonight is, before we final sign any Mylar that's gonna get recorded at the registry, which is our final approval of a plan, we always have to go back through our conditions of approval and make sure that they were met before we sign that plan. So that's where, on this one specifically, we had a dozen or just under, conditions, 10 conditions. So we're trying to make sure that all conditions have been met before we sign a Mylar. Again, some are very clear, some are easy, check, check, check. The ones that are not are, number 4, wetland restoration must be completed per the NHDES requirements. Is that a condition precedent or subsequent, meaning can we sign off on it and it's a condition that has to be met, but, within a specific timeline? And then the final one would be the other one to me, that's, that kinda goes hand in hand with that.
Which is,
The
All
deadline
condition,
for
completion
conditions.
for all conditions by July 1st, 2023. So if,
My take is that it's subsequent because the recorded plan is often needed in many cases to be able to begin work and issue deeds.
so we're stuck in a situation right now is where the applicant can't continue the work until they get a signed Mylar in order to finish what they wanna do.
For
Since
financing.
our conditions that we put on here is inhibiting him from getting the Mylar signed. and for him to continue with the project.
It's about the interpretation. My interpretation is that my interpretation that I've put out there is that we can sign the plan, it can be recorded, and that final condition, there's still conditions, and it's still enforceable subsequent to signing the plan. So, I think we can sign the plan, and these are via the Department of Public Works driveway permit and the code enforcement's building permit.
Yeah, the code enforcement's gonna
They
get
have,
these,
they have
these
checks and
conditions.
balances,
so that's how normally it's done, is the checks and balances of what the planning board gives goes into the code enforcement ordinance / building inspector.
Dale gets a copy.
To oversee our plan to make sure it gets completed.
Yeah,
That's
code
part of his-
enforcement or building related, correct, yes.
That's what his
Especially in
job
this
is.
case, because he was involved in he's well aware of,
He's well aware of
The
all this, cause
wetlands.
he's the one who brought up the whole thing for
Yes.
us in the beginning, that's why we're here.
But this condition was also a part of, the reason for this was there was a pre-existing condition occurring that was within a violation potentially of our zoning ordinance, so.
It's
the
because they
applicant-
went through the wetlands with the driveway.
The applicant, in lieu of going through the conditional use permit to continue that process, where there was no state approval, they opted to, they indicated that they had agreed with restoring the wetlands based on the state process. And we set a timeline for that to be done.
I guess my take too is, if this was a commercial project, we had a developer who was a well-known developer who had the finances to, say they were putting in a road with multiple lots, there's an incentive there, there's a financial backing, but where it's a single-family home, we've already been told that it's, the primary goal is it will be a financed work, through a bank. And the bank won't even entertain closing out that financing and issuing funds until there's a recorded plan on file as part of their due diligence. So, even if work wanted to begin late March, depending on how this winter goes, can't do that until there's a recorded plan at the registry. Otherwise, we're placing a financial condition, essentially saying it has to be out of pocket cost to do the work.
Well,
So that's why,
I'm
I
gonna tell
guess
you right
that's where
now,
I think I
I'll
support,
mean-
I think that's why I support the signing of the plan.
It's a catch-22, that's what it is.
Yeah, we left ourselves in a conundrum, we can't.
So we can't hold that.
Well, I think it's the interpretation of the conditions. I mean, we could have added a note
We're the
on here
ones who put
saying,
the
we
conditions in
could
there.
have, we could have specifically said, hey, this condition is subsequent to plan signing, but I think at the time it was, now I think we can interpret it that way. So that's why I think I'm in support of, I know I'm the one that made the motion, but, that's why I think I think we can move forward with signing the plan tonight.
I'll sign the plan, doesn't bother me.
I think you can and should.
Yeah, can certainly notify Dale that
There's 1, 2, 3.
he's the last man to see this at this point after.
Are we on a
sign it.
vote on this right now with the signing of the plans or not? Or is that what we're
I don't really
doing?
know how that works.
Well, I mean, I'm.
No,
I'm
we
sitting
can, I
here-
mean, I don't think we have to make it that formal.
I wanna go home, so I'm just
Conditions
thinking,
are
why
met,
are we
yeah.
talking about this and going over? It's 9 o'clock.
So again, my only holdup is, we gave a specific date and time of everything. This was a pre-existing condition that had to be met by the state standards, regardless of the subdivision occurring. So, that wetland restoration was a process we're not holding up the financing for. The financing may be held up for building a house, and I'm cognizant of that and sympathetic to it. But the wetland piece of it was pre-existing for years and had a state process in process and a wetland restoration plan and a deadline that was missed, a deadline that was continued, and then a deadline that has now been agreed upon. I'm nervous, I don't wanna kick it and make it some other department's problem now and say, well, Dale, the building inspector, you now have to enforce this, we've signed it. and
Are
now
you
we're gonna
proposing
go."
we don't sign the Mylar?
I propose that we don't sign it tonight, that I ask legal, based on our specific conditions that we gave and the deadline that we gave, should we sign the Mylar now, or should we wait until signing it by that deadline, once conditions are
The
met?
deadline being July 31st, or what was the date?
July
July
1st.
first, 2023.
July 1st?
But then they can't get funding to do the work. Catch-22.
Which is awful.
Everything else is done on there. We've coordinated, done everything you guys have asked.
I mean, it's awful, so.
Again, regardless of the work has to get done regardless of the house being built. So, I'm not saying, I'm not trying to sound unsympathetic or cold about that. We gave conditions, we gave a timeline. I'm kind of a stickler for like our rules, like, so if we line these out, I don't wanna make it our building inspector, code enforcement to say, oh, well, I'm not gonna, it's approved plan, I'm not gonna give you a building permit until you've done this, until it's done. Or I've let you build it, I'm not gonna give you a certificate of occupancy because it's not done. You completed it in August and it was supposed to be done by July 1st, so by the standards set forth by this board, we're saying you can never have a certificate of occupancy of a house that you've now funded and built. I mean, that's a lawsuit to the town on the approval. So I think, don't wanna hold it up more than that 2 weeks at our next meeting. I think a pound of caution is important. So I guess it's up to you guys. If there's 4 people that wanna sign that plan tonight, that's
As
the
Sue said,
approval?
it's catch 22 because it's also could be a lawsuit if we don't sign it.
If, being 2 weeks in February 8th, since there is a member that's requested legal, is February 8th okay for you? I mean, obviously,
that's just the earliest we can get it.
he says that because that's the next meeting. They want specific, and I think the chair's proposing a specific request to legal from our end to focus on that,
Actually,
those 2 conditions.
how about this? I can send a request to legal. If they say that, yes, that's a condition subsequent and move forward with sign the plan, I'll come in and sign the plan. As soon, you know, we don't have to have another meeting for that,
The
so,
chair can sign it
Right.
himself.
That makes
One
more
signature.
sense.
yeah, I'd coordinate with the land use clerk and come in. Again,
Do I have any other option?
So,
Done everything else, this is just, obviously, been in a rut for 2 years to get this done. Having 2 weeks every other, is not conducive to getting any of this done.
so that expedites it because it's just a matter of
And I-
getting it big.
and it's a busy season for the town council, but I can definitely put a,
Important
request
button on
on
their
it,
email.
yeah.
So what are we talking, a week instead of 2 weeks?
I would hope less than that. Yeah.
Ed is going to send an email pending the lawyer's response and a positive. He can sign the plan on a random Tuesday.
His is the only signature needed on the plan.
You only need one, legally, you only need one.
We generally have always had more signatures, but we only need one.
Sometimes only have one signature for the chair. We just have
But
a,
it has to be the chair.
correct.
Right.
Let's move to do that.
Okay, so I'll send it to legal.
You're the only ones really objecting, so.
Do you wanna vote, or?
So Sarah, I'll reach out, Alana's got your, land use clerk has your contact information. I'll reach out to county council tomorrow, request that, just a review of our conditions, make sure that we're good to go. I don't wanna put you in a bind, I don't wanna put the town in a bind, just wanna make sure everything's in a row. And then if they say yes, I'll come in and sign it, and we'll let you know that it's signed, ready to go. All right, thank you so much. Public comment, this is the time of night where we accept public comment. There's nobody here tonight, so we'll move on. Approval of minutes, I've requested we table the 12-14 minutes originally. I do have my edits tonight. So I'd like to read those in, and then if anybody else has any, we can we can add it, or we can, make a motion to accept. And then the January 11th minutes, I think we should table. My edits were based on and I'll print them out and send them on in as well. Line 17, amend to 7 PM. I think it said 6:30. Line 32, after this case, we would add and left the table. I think it's just make clear when someone recuses if they've left the table. Line 63 was amend to Mr. Beal advised the board had sought and received input from town council regarding the initial yield plan and how to interpret it. Line 67, before vote, add roll call to distinguish that it was a roll call vote. Line 73, delete decisions of to read as to close the minutes in the non-public session. Line 75, before vote, again, add roll call, that was closing the non-public. Line 82, at the end of the sentence, add with a cistern on Moores Road Mr. Guyer indicated if a cistern is required on Jamsa Trail, they would push back on that, as other recent subdivisions have been approved with sprinklers versus a cistern, so it's clarification language. And then just my general note that I had to myself here for us as a board, we should be cognizant of when we use accept and approve. Like when we're accepting applications as complete, that's accepting, instead of approving as complete. Line 214, add alternate after participating. Line 222, amend to Mr. Beal recused himself from this case and left the table. Line 256, add, at the end of the sentence, add, and if wellhead protection area should be included. The board opted to not include the wellhead protection area at this time, as impact of adding this will need to be considered more, including how many properties may be impacted. That was regarding the warrant article. Line 264 through 267, remove inadvertent numbers. There was 40 comma 43 in there. Line 281, need to confirm motion included Article 2, Section B, and then add the language. And then line 340, after land use clerk, add and board. So nothing drastic in there, and I'll email those over so it's easier. That was all my edits for the December 14th, and again, it was recommended to us by the interim town administrator that per the RSA, right to know and everything, that we do all our edits at public meetings as opposed to any kind of emails to the land use clerk changing things.
So I move to approve minutes for December 14th as amended.
A second?
Motion by Mr. Anderson, a second by Ms. Mooney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that motion carries, that's counting again, 6-0. I recommend we table the January 11th minutes, unless anybody has anything they want to address on those. We'll run this through quickly. Staff board member updates.
No?
Nothing.
We made a decision on who we're gonna hire for the town. We're going through, background checks for the who might be our new town administrator. It's not public, so we're not saying who it is until the background gets checked, until we agree with the contract with the person. But just so you know that we have made a decision, as a board on who we're going to set forward as to possibly be our new town administrator. Our town infrastructure is falling apart. We have more problems coming up, which is costing more and more money to the town. So when it comes to the warrant articles, when you read them, please vote for them. The town needs to spend money on fixing its infrastructure before it even gets catastrophically worse than it already is. And that's what we've been talking about, and it's budget season. So we finished the budget, and we went over all the warrant articles, which were pretty good, and we'll be discussing them all at deliberation. So if you wanna come down to Nottingham to deliberation and listen to them, great, we'll see you there.
Deliberative session is next Saturday, February
Fourth?
4th
Yeah.
at the school.
Correct.
So, in lieu of town meeting, which is no longer in existence. All right, thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. McKinnon?
I'll echo what Mr. Moore said about trying to read into details, try and learn some of the details on some of these warrant articles. Don't just look at the dollar figures. Look at the investment that's required, in the town, especially where there's been a number of years where I think there's been, some low levels of infrastructure investment.
That's putting it nicely.
And, it's one of those scenarios, if you wait 2 years, or if you wait 1 year, it's 2 years of deterioration, it's an exponential scale, so that's often the case with paved roads and dirt roads.
I think the town's been very fiscally conservative, responsible for many years, to a detriment in some aspects, not faulting anyone. But we're seeing it now where, as Mr. Moore echoed, or I mentioned, if we don't spend some money now on fixes, it's probably gonna cost anomaly more. And also, it gets to be a problem with staff and retaining people if they don't have, if their work conditions are very difficult, basically, so, thank you. For me, I sent the 2 letters to Raymond based on our comments about the 2 developments of regional impact that we had. Again, they're non-binding, comments, so I addressed, our concerns that we had outlined, for those. I sent those on the 19th, or Alana actually sent them over for me. I wrote up an update for the town report on behalf of the planning board, kind of just echoing
Thank you.
what we've seen, what we're seeing, what we're gonna be past with in the future, some of the challenges of not having a planner. And again, the value of right now 9 individuals here that bring a wealth of information and backgrounds at no cost, is, so when we ask for 65,000 in a budget, it's not that we're trying to be, total, I think our total budget, I'm sorry, was about 65,000, that, including the land use clerk's, salary, and that we're trying to be conservative as well, but protect the town, with a lot of best practices and help. So I think that's all I had for tonight for myself. Ms. Mooney?
I have nothing this evening.
All right, motion to adjourn, anyone?
So moved.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lana, anything?
No.
Okay,
So moved.
all right. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, again.